This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, thanks for joining, and just give me a second while bring up all the tools. All right, let me start sharing my screen. Hey, if you do not have any questions, I would request every one of you to go on mute. Thank you. Okay, if you do have questions, please do unmute and ask me. No worries about that. Okay, so before we get started to our with our course content, I'm sure some of you might have not been able to attend the demo, but I'm not going to repeat. But you will have you could get the recorded session and you could go through it if you want. Okay, so yeah, we have covered pretty comprehensively in our course what we are going to. I mean, in the demo, what we are going to cover in the course. And of course, again, I heard that some of you had questions regarding the course content. Yes, there might be some differences in the course content you might have received, and I have updated because that might have been slightly outdated. We've made some changes, like earlier I used to teach Jenkins, but I see that more and more people are moving towards Azure DevOps along with Azure. So Azure DevOps is the I mean Azure DevOps, and maybe also even what is that other thing? GitHub Actions. These have been picking up recently along with GitLab CI and other things. So I thought I would teach Azure DevOps instead of Jenkins. Okay, maybe we'll have some reference to Jenkins, how it is used in Jenkins as well. But apart from that, all the course content would be the same about. I mean, meaning what I've given in the curriculum and here. Maybe in the PDF you might have received, it might have been little elaborate in the presentation I gave the other day. Okay. Oh, what's wrong with my mouse? Okay. Yeah. Firefox is not responding. That's quite strange. Just give me a second. So that's change. Okay. Uh, Not to scare you, this time on my machine, Firefox has frozen. Come on. What's wrong with this one? Damn it. How many process does it have? Mm-hmm. One minute, please. Okay, so regarding the course content, yes, that's the update. There are some changes. Uh, but if you think uh, anything is completely missing from the original content in this, I would definitely like to listen from you and see if we can review that one. But I think it's only maybe the difference between the course content you were initially given in the PDF and the course content that I have shared. Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what's wrong with this system?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, just give me a second, please. Mhm. And I think you had some other questions. Some of you might have had some other questions which you could not ask me on the demo, but yeah, you can definitely ask me now. Um, but before we do that, let me give the way I take up this course. Unfortunately, my system is acting up today. Of all days, today, the first session itself. Okay. Anyway, so how do I organize my classes? Okay. So I pretty much want it to be very interactive. Okay. I want you to all to talk to me whenever you have any questions instead of holding them for later. You can ask me anytime. Okay. You have a question. This is August, right? Okay. So you don't have to wait till the end of the session. If you have a question, just ask me. Just that you know don't interrupt me in the middle of the sentence like I told you the other day, but pretty much I wanted it to be interactive. And another thing is I want it to be as what do you call, as interactive as possible, not only in the initial days, but what happens is as days go along people lose steam and they focus. I don't know what happens. People stop asking me questions and they're in a different world. And coming to, again, how do I use my tools and all these things? um, I basically, yeah, let me give you an overview of the tools I use so that you get an idea. So I use this tool for a note taking tool so that if I have to write anything that might not be really clear while I speak, so I write it here. Uh, or to explain some stuff, I write it using this Joplin, or sometimes I might use a code editor like Atom or VS Code where I write the code. Okay, you don't have to have these tools. This is only for my teaching purpose. Okay, and mostly everything is done through Firefox. And today, of all days, it's acting up. Okay, and we use a terminal to communicate with our other machines like your cloud virtual machines, or to learn Linux we use our terminal. In your case, you're going to install a tool called as Git. Okay, so Git comes with a tool called as Git Bash. Okay, so Git is a tool that is used for source code management, which is part of our course as well. We'll talk about that as well. So Git Bash is a command line utility through which you can connect to other machines, through which you can interact with or you can also run some kind of bash commands which are similar to Linux commands. So when we learn about Azure virtual machines and you have to connect to Azure virtual machines, in my case I'm going to use this Terminator tool. Okay, and in your case you're going to use Git Bash, not immediately but later. Okay, so that's one. And most of our classes will be hands-on, meaning less of presentations, more of uh, doing with our more of demos, showing how to get things done. Okay. But we will have good amount of theoretical knowledge as well. Okay, and our classes will be 7 to 8, but sometimes because our course is quite exhaustive, we might stretch till 8:15, 8:25. And trust me, there were days when um, we had to troubleshoot and the classes went till 9 o'clock also. But I want that to be an exception rather than a rule. So you could think that our classes will start exactly at 7, 7, 7, 8, because I might you know there's one session already between 6 to 7 that might extend a little. But between 7:05 to 8:10, 8:15 is our regular class interval IST time. Okay, so you do your conversion in your local time if you're from the other part of the world. Yeah, so these four are the predominant tools I use. Because why am I telling you this? Because when I switch my screens, you have to understand which screen I'm using. Okay, so I within the Firefox also, I mean, online tools also, I use this tool called as draw.io or app.diagram.net. This is a nice tool to create diagrams and show you, architectural diagrams or concepts. Okay, this I use. Of course, we log into our Azure portal uh, to see and create our resources. All of you will create an Azure subscription in the second week, or maybe early next week. You are going to create your Azure subscriptions. Till that time, don't create anything. Okay, so that's about it. And again, let me for those who have not joined the demo, or those who have already joined. Uh, mhm. Okay, okay, this is weird. Firefox. Today is not the day you do this stuff. It's freezing in the presentation mode. I don't know why. Uh, Okay, let me not open that presentation ever again. Right. So let me try to go to the course curriculum somehow. Yeah. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, then please go ahead and ask me.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
In place of Jenkins, so what are the tool we are going to learn in place of
Azure
Jenkins?
DevOps. Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is a tool uh, which is actually more than one tool. It's more than two to three tools together. It's a service. Okay, it's a service that combines your capability of GitHub. It combines the capability of your Jira. You could use Azure DevOps as a project management tool to create issues and all these things. You could use that to, uh, sorry, this is DevOps with AWS. You could use it to store your source code. All right.
Okay.
So there are multiple different what do you call use cases for that. But
Mm-hmm.
it will replace your Jenkins as CI/CD tool. Jenkins simply will offer you uh, Jenkins will simply offer you CI/CD capabilities, or rather, Jenkins has only CI/CD capabilities, whereas Azure DevOps can be a CI/CD tool, can be a source code repository like GitHub. It, it can also replace your project management tools like what is that? Jira. You know Jira, right? How
Hmm.
many of you have
Somehow.
heard about Jira? Yeah, Jira is like a project management tool where you create tickets and assign to various people. For example, you need to work on a new bug, or you need to work on creating new infrastructure as a DevOps engineer. Then your project manager is going to create a ticket for you and assign it to you. Or sometimes you could yourself create it and assign some estimations, like I will do it in 4 days or 10 hours, and you can assign some priority and all these things. All these things can be done in Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps is a combination of project management plus source code management plus CI/CD tool, right? So we are going to learn that tool instead of Jenkins.
Okay. Nice.
So again, I'm showing the curriculum for you just to get an understanding. So we are going to learn Linux operating system and various aspects within that. And of course, our cloud is going to be Azure. These are very high level concepts which are broken into various small aspects in your the curriculum that might have been shared with you. But yeah, we'll cover all of these things. And from the scripting perspective, we will learn Linux scripting. From the infrastructure as code, we learn Terraform, source code management, Git and GitHub, software configuration management, Ansible, continuous integration and delivery, CI/CD. We are going to use Azure DevOps, and of course, we'll also learn about the theoretical concepts of CI/CD. From the containers, we are going to learn about Docker and Kubernetes, and monitoring and alerting, we'll learn Azure Monitor. Okay, that's it. So, any questions before we proceed? Feel free to ask anything, like, suppose it's like a Q&A after your demo session.
No, sir. Sir, what are the
Okay.
topics are we going to discuss today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the basic, networking, or rather, I would say, how a web application works at a very high level. Okay. So this will give some platform for us to go into the next section of topics.
Okay.
All right. Shall we
Sir,
proceed then?
yes, sir, but I have one doubt. What is the difference between DevOps with Azure and DevOps with AWS?
There we will learn AWS. Here we are learning Azure. So, DevOps, DevOps is a practice, and it also includes a set of tools, right? It has a set of tools for your IAC, like infrastructure creation. You have tools for your software configuration. You have tools for CI/CD and monitoring. Uh, Whereas cloud is your infrastructure provider, who provides you the VMs, who provides you the virtual networks. So in this course, we are going to learn Azure first. We're going to get understanding of Azure. Then we are going to learn all these DevOps tools on the Azure cloud. Okay, Azure is Microsoft's cloud. In case of AWS, you're going to learn, all these technologies with AWS. That's the only difference. So the cloud, you're learning different cloud providers. There it's AWS, here it's Azure. Everything else is same.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Someone had other
Then
question?
for
Yeah.
container orchestration, which one is the tool with Azure?
Kubernetes. In Azure, see, um, Azure has two services. One is called as Azure Container Services, and there is Kubernetes services. So we are going to learn Kubernetes services because AKS, or Azure Kubernetes service, is nothing but it is using the open source Kubernetes version. So if you learn the concepts, so our Kubernetes course is going to be very very high level, meaning we are going to touch all the concepts, but if you want to go deep into Kubernetes, it will itself take 1 month. And I would also not recommend that you going into very deep in this course itself. But we are going to cover all the important concepts. We are going to do the demo of how to create a service, how to create a pod, everything we are going to learn on AKS, Azure Kubernetes Services. But these concepts can be applied on EKS. EKS is nothing but the Kubernetes service offered by AWS. Or you can use the same concepts when you're using your own on-premise Kubernetes, meaning you might create it on your own servers. When I say your own servers, a company's own servers, even then you can apply all these concepts that we are going to discuss. So we are going to learn Kubernetes service on Azure, which is AKS, Azure Kubernetes Services. That's the orchestration tool.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, Kiran.
Yep.
Kiran, in our course, OpenShift is also covered, no?
What is that? Sorry.
OpenShift Jenkins. OpenShift.
No, OpenShift is not covered. We are covering AKS. OpenShift is again a container orchestration tool. On top of a container orchestration, you have an additional layer which gives you UI and all. OpenShift is nothing but a Kubernetes implementation by Red Hat. Okay. Whereas we are learning AKS. As I said, once you learn AKS, once you get the concepts of Kubernetes, you can apply the same concepts to OpenShift. There are some changes in concepts because OpenShift has created its own wrapper around Kubernetes, meaning on top of Kubernetes, they have added additional APIs, but all the concepts are same, like pod, what is a service, what is a volume, all these things are same in both OpenShift and as well in Kubernetes. Okay, so we are learning Kubernetes, not any extra layers like OpenShift or Rancher or all these things. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So now let's get into our today's topic. All right. So let me ask you this question. I don't have any presentation for today. I'll do it without a presentation. So let's say you type google.com and hit enter. Okay. From the time you complete typing your website name and hit enter, and from the time the page loads, you know what happens?
It checks for the DNS resolution.
Okay. All right. So what's DNS resolution? What's DNS resolution?
So the backend, the IP, so the Google.com, where when you are typing on the browser, it might be assigned to some of the IP at the backend actually. So
Okay.
the application got deployed in some of uh,
Okay. Google.com IP address. All right.
yeah.
Anyone else wants to try? What happens when from the time we enter the name to the time the page loads? Okay, that's a good answer about DNS resolution. Okay, so understand one thing. Computers do not understand domain names. Domain names are for our reference. This is called as a domain name. I mean, what we typically refer as website name is nothing but a domain name. Okay, so computers do not understand um, domain names. They understand something known as IP address. Okay, we have a good class about IP addresses and various classes of IP addresses, but just understand that IP address is a numerical representation of your domain name, something like this. Okay, so first thing we need to get is what is the IP address for our domain name or the website you're trying to access. Okay, and also understand computers even don't understand these numbers. Computers understand only electric pulses. So if there is a pulse, it's one. If there is off, it's zero. So they understand only binary language, right? So this will also be eventually converted into binary, but we'll come to that part later. Okay, computers understand electric pulses on and off. So one and zero is the language of computers. But there are various layers in between those electric pulses, ones and zeros, and you know numerical numbers and all these things. But suffice it to say that first of all, if you want to access a website, you have to know the IP address for that. So the IP address will be in the numerical format. Okay, so to get the new where does this IP address will come from? So someone has answered that the DNS resolution will take place, but where does this IP address come from? Anyone wants to take a shot at it? Where do my browser or my computer get the DNS name? So let's say this is the user. I'm the user. I'm trying to access google.com on my browser. So someone has said, I need to get a IP address. So where do we get this IP address from? Okay, so by default, your browsers have the capability to cache them, or your operating system has the ability to cache in the sense to store them for some amount of time. The spelling is CACHE. Okay, some people call it as cache, some people call it as cache, or whatever is your pronunciation. Okay, so it has to get the IP address. So sometimes your browser or your operating system might you know, cache them, but if only you already accessed it. But let's say you never accessed it, then it goes to what will be the next point of connection in your home? Your router, right? So some routers have the capability to cache DNS names. Not all routers, but most modern routers have the capability to. So it will check if the router has the IP address. I mean, your router itself will check if it has this cached inside it. If there is nothing yet, it will forward to the next hop. What is that? What will be the next connection after? How do our network transfer from your phone or laptop or desktop to router? And from router, where does it go? It goes to your internet service provider, right?
Right.
So your internet service provider has something known as DNS resolver, okay, which basically acts, which basically resolves your DNS. When I say resolve, it gives the answer to your query. Your query is, what is the IP address for google.com? Okay. So it resolves that IP address and give it to you. But let's suppose no one ever accessed google.com from this ISP. Okay, just an example. Then where does it send the next request to? Your DNS resolver. Okay, so wherever you type IP addresses like google.com, for instance, or even wikipedia.org, there is a last character which we do not see, which is known as your dot. Okay. This dot is called as your root server. Okay, so if you take any domain name, like, for example, wikipedia.com, give me some, wikipedia.org, give me some examples, facebook.com, google.com, and you have sub services like drive.google.com. Okay. Um, any other websites you can think of? Or let's say mit.edu. These are various types of websites, right? Sorry, give me some other
Gmail.com.
names like, yeah, gmail.com or google.com, that's fine. Let's say bbc.co.uk, okay? Or australia.com.au. We have websites like, .in or .co.in, all these kinds of websites, right? So each of these websites, at the end, we don't put anything, but there is one implicit character known as dot. Okay, that is what is the root server. And this .co.uk and .edu, .com.au, .in or .co.in, these are all called as your top level domains. Okay, within .org you might have multiple websites, right? Wikipedia.org, or yeah, what do you call that? Maybe who.org. Similarly, within .com, you have a lot of all commercial websites come under .com. All the websites related to organizations will typically have .org. India related websites will have .in. UK related websites have .co.uk. Educational institutions have .edu. Okay. Um, Again, there are other websites like .tech, uh, top level domains. Okay, .xyz. I mean, there will be some name like, my website .xyz or whatever it is. My website dot. There are various kinds of. In fact, we have this thing called as club as well. .club. So I have a website named as learndevops.club. I mean, I have this name registered, but I'm not running any website. But I'm saying this. These last things you see are the top level domains. In the case Hey, hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think we have lost the connectivity briefly. Not sure why. Okay, anyway, so there is a dot that is that we'll never see, but there is a dot your browsers will automatically add. So that dot represents the root servers. So there is a top level server for all these servers. Okay. For all the top level domains like you have .org, .com, right? .tech. Earlier there used to be only very few like .com, .edu, uh, .org, maybe .co.in. .in was also not there until very recently. .com.au, .co.uk. Some countries have their own. Israel has IL. What else? France has .fr. Different kind of domain, top level domains there are. But top level for this one is the root server, which is represented as dot. Okay, and underneath this you will have a lot of other websites. Okay, um, so .org, .com, .edu, all these things. So first thing they go to your service provider DNS resolution resolver rather will send it to the root server. Okay, so the top level server is known as your root server, which maintains the list of all the top level domains. Okay, so let's say your root server also doesn't have it, then it will send the request to your TLDs or top level domains. What are the top level domains? The ones we just discussed: .com, .co.in, .gov.in, .gov for US. Okay, all these are top level domains. .org. These days we have .me, .website, whatnot. You name it, you have them. .xyz, .gov for US websites, .gov.in for Indian websites, or you have NICH.in, a lot of top level domains, right? So the root server will forward the request to your top level domains. So the top level domains, so you're looking for google.com. So it says, so it will forward it to the .com server. I mean, all the servers, I mean, all the domains will not have the information in the same server. Each of them will have their own top level domain. So it will send it to .com top level domain DNS server. And here it says, I know where this website belongs to or where he brought it from. So it will send it to that person. So if I want to create a website called as google.com, can I simply create it? If I want to create a domain name called a website called as google.com, can I simply create it? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
I can. So if I create a website called as google.com, to which web page will it go? Will it go to the website that is created by google.com or to my website? Let's say I'm planning to create a website called as um, like let's say learndevops.com. Okay. So here, one of you, let's say Balaji, wants to also create the same website, learndevops.com. So if we both create the same website, so if you're accessing learndevops.com, to which website should it go? To the website I created or to the website Balaji created? You understand my point? If I want to create a website, can I simply go and create a server and say my website name is learndevops.com and everyone should be able to reach that? Will that be possible?
No, Kiran, it's not possible straightforward.
So
We
what
have
do we do?
to we have to do
We need to
register
register.
our domain.
Okay, so register our domain. So where do we do that?
The TLDs.
Not really. TLDs, TLDs will maintain the list of all the domains. But where do you register is There are organizations which are called as registrars. Okay. For example, you might have seen ads regarding
Yeah.
GoDaddy. GoDaddy is a registrar. AWS is a registrar. Namecheap, there is another one.
Is also
It's
there.
a sorry,
Wix.
Wix.
Yeah,
Spelling
WIX.
Wix. It's a domain register. Okay, I haven't heard about this.
Recently it
Uh,
started.
okay. Wix is a domain registrar. Okay, good. So you can buy it from Wix. There is another one which I already prescribe to my students because they offer some free websites, free domain names. But also you can buy domain names from Freenom as well. I have bought one domain name from Freenom. Okay, so these are some of the examples from where you can buy your domain name, register your domain name. For that, you have to pay some amount. And what if I buy learndevops.com from GoDaddy and Balaji buys it from, let's say, learndevops.com. Sorry, Namecheap. So will it be possible? No. All these companies will maintain a list with the TLDs. So you cannot install the same, you cannot purchase the same domain name. Maybe he could try for something like learndevops.club or learndevops.xyz. Okay. Uh, so that's why big companies will also buy the other top level domains with their name. For example, if you go to facebook.org, it will eventually redirect to facebook.com because they have bought facebook.org domain name as well. Okay. If you go to facebook.co.in, maybe it might read it. Yeah, someone has bought. Look at this one. This is another scam. Okay, so someone has bought this domain name called as facebook.co.in. Okay, but what it does is it takes you to some random website which is even not secured. You can see this is connection not secured. This doesn't have even a TLS certificate. Okay, so this is a scam, obviously. Okay. So they registered a domain name called as facebook.co.in because Facebook forgot about co.in. They thought no one will register. So that one was taken away by some other company. Or if you similarly go to facebook. Maybe co.uk, it might take you to the legitimate Facebook page only. Maybe they did not register there as well. Similarly with the flipkart.com, right? If you go to flipkart.co.in, it still takes you to flipkart.com. Okay, because they bought both the website names, domain names. They bought flipkart.com, they also bought flipkart.co.in. What happens if I simply type flipkart.in? Yeah, it is taking to some unsecure page. Okay, so this was created by some other person. Starfield Technologies is the company which created this flipkart.in. Okay, if I go it, I am running Linux operating system, so I don't think it's still redirecting to flipkart.com, which is a good thing. But generally, uh, yeah, most of the companies do this. When they buy some website name like .com, they also buy the corresponding .co, .uk, .co, .in, all these things, so that no one will try to do the scams by sending it to different accounts and all these things. Understood? So, but you cannot buy, or two people cannot buy the same domain name from different registrars. Just because you're purchasing from different registrar, that doesn't mean you can buy the same domain name, or two people can buy the same domain name, because all these details are maintained by two organizations. Anyone knows what these organizations are? These are non-profit organizations. So have you heard about ICANN?
No.
Okay, ICANN and IANA, these are two institutions that will maintain details about all the IP addresses, all the domain names, and all these things. Okay, just give me a second. I'm connecting my charger. Okay, you might lose the display for a second. I'll reshare. Just give me a second. Okay, do you see my screen? Fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Um,
Yes, yes.
so there are two institutions. One is ICANN, is Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Okay, so Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which is responsible for creating your domain names and which will allow your top level domains, not exactly domain names, for top level domains. Can we allow .com, .in, .tech? Because I cannot create any website, right? So I would rather be happy if I can create my own last name, like my website with .kiran itself. But for that, I have to make an application with ICANN, and they'll have to approve this. Okay. So similarly, we have IANA, Internet Authority for what's his name? Internet Authority for Assigned Names and Numbers, right? Yeah, Internet Assigned Numbers and Numbers Authority. So these both are related institutions, ICANN and IANA. I mean, you don't have to understand anything, just for your understanding. These people will control the domain names and IP addresses. Not assigning IP addresses randomly, but what is the range of IP addresses that should be allowed and all these things. Okay. Um, so anyway, long story short, if you have to buy a domain name, you have to go to a registrar, and when you're trying to register from a when you're trying to buy for a website from, let's say, GoDaddy or Namecheap or Wix, okay, what these people do is we'll check with the IANA and ICANN databases and see if if this website is already available or not. Okay, if it's available, they will give you a price. You have to pay $8 or $9 or whatever it is. So if you're going for something like .com websites, they might be costlier. .co.in might be costlier, but you're going from some random website like .tech, .xyz or something like that, they might be less in number. For example, let's go to freenom.com, which is a free one. I mean, they offer some free websites, not everything is free. Let's also go to Namecheap. Both of them are domain name registers only. So here, if I want to type google.com, what will happen? I'll click on check availability. It says, sorry, google.com is not available. Not only google.com, not google.com, google.ml, google.ga, Google, all these things are sold out. Okay. So it says, see, none of these are selectable. These are all sold out. For what if I want to type something like kiran.com? Someone might have already bought that one as well. I have kiran.gq. So this is where you are going to create your domain name sometime later, and you will use one of these free options, which will be like yourname.gq. They're just for testing, right? If you look at all these things, these are all sold out. That's why you don't have select option. Not only here, even if you go to Namecheap and search for google.com, of course it will say that none of them is available. So it will show Google all the important top level domains. It's asking you to make an offer to Google. Google will. So if it is already sold out, you can make an offer to someone to buy that. For example, let's say I created google.io even before Google has created. Okay. And if I ask them to, um, if Google wants to take that away, they'll contact me and they'll make an offer and I can sell that domain name. Some people do that. Just like how you register your movie names, right? You can register your movie names. Even if you don't have a script, some dummy script you give and you register that one. And later, if someone else, like, big production houses wants to use that name, they have to contact this guy to get that name. Okay. Similarly here, if I registered google.biz before Google registered it, Google has to reach out to me and buy me out, and give me some cash to buy it. Okay. Anyway, so as I'm saying, you can go to different registrars, but all these things are maintained by a central authority like ICANN. So you know that no two people can create the same domain name. Okay, coming back to our diagram, our flow diagram. Where is that? Here. Okay, so your top level.com will have all the details about which website was bought from which registrar. So they will redirect you to the registrar, something like GoDaddy, Namecheap, or Freenom or Wix or AWS. And here you might have the domain name, you might have the IP address. So you might have. So these are like your telephone directories. DNS is like a telephone directory. It simply maintains google.com followed by the IP address. Okay. Of course, there are advanced routing technologies and all these things, but simply to understand, your DNS is like your telephone directory. What is a telephone directory? Have you ever heard of telephone directory? So back in the day when we did not have mobile phones and only LAN connections, if you're old enough like me, you would know that we had these big books known as telephone directories, where every person who took a subscription from BSNL, their number is registered in that phone. So if you're looking for something like uh, Thotakura Apparao, you have to go to T and search for Thotakura Apparao and call its number. Similarly, DNS also has those key value pairs. You have a domain name, you have an IP address. So it will send it. But sometimes the registrars might not have also these details. What Google might prefer is, it will prefer that I will maintain my own DNS records. Okay, it will create it creates its own DNS servers. In the DNS server, it will have all the details about their subsites and everything. Okay, it's easy for Google to maintain their own DNS in their own location. So they maintain the DNS record. But how do I know what IP address Google is maintaining in their records? Right? That's the next question. So for that, what you need to do is, there are some set of servers known as name servers here. Those name servers you have to update here. Again, we'll do a demo for the DNS. I will explain this with an example. I have my own website, so don't worry. I'll show how all these things are done. I mean, not these things. These things are out of our control. But once you register your website, as I said, you could also register on Freenom and check it out for yourself. So I'll explain how to update your name servers and all these things using Azure DNS. Okay. So in this case, here you'll update something known as name servers. The registrar says, google.com is bought from me, but he's not maintaining the DNS records with me, but I know where you can find the DNS records. Go to one of these name servers. So he will redirect to the Google DNS, and I'll get this IP address. And from here, when it sends back, my registrar will cache it. The top level domain.com will cache it. The root server will cache it. The DNS resolver will cache it. Okay. My router, some routers have the capability to cache it. My browser, my operating system, everything caches it. So next time, let's say someone from your own home. So I got the first time I accessed google.com. So next time someone access google.com from their mobile phone. So in your home, what is the first hop? Even if they're using a mobile phone and connected to Wi-Fi, it will go to your router, right? So your router itself, your router itself will answer the question this time. You need not go all this way. This time the router itself will say, okay, this is the IP address. And next time someone accessing from the same browser or a different browser, the operating system itself will answer the question. Okay, I have the IP address for google.com. Okay. Or let's say someone else who is using my own IP is using again google.com, right? And they might have never accessed it. They might be accessing it for the first time. So their router also doesn't have that information. But this time it will be resolved at the DNS resolver level itself. It need not go all these ways, because I already queried for that information and it has been cached in all these various layers. So it will directly give it to you. Okay. But there is another concept known as time to live, or we call it as TTL. Okay. TTL is the time to live, is the amount of time you can cache the DNS name, because something might have happened on the google.com and Google decided to change the IP address because they had to recreate some servers or whatever reasons, their IP address has been changed. Okay. So now if you still have the old IP address, it will not go to the google.com website. It will not go to anywhere. That IP address is gone for whatever reasons. So you have something known as TTL, time to live. Okay, or when Google changes it, Google tries to refresh in all the places where it was earlier cached, but that might not happen. But TTL, what it does is, based on the amount of seconds you give, it will try to get the latest value from the DNS thing. Okay, so after the TTL is done, the value will be expired and it will get the fresh value. Okay, so this is how you get only the IP address. Till till now you got only your IP address, not even your browser, not even the home page. You did not even go to google.com web page. So now your browser knows where to go. Okay, so it will go to the google.com data centers, because let's say you got the IP address like this one, 12.10.220.11. Okay, now your browser has the IP address with it. It knows where to go. So in simple terms, if you ask me, this is like your contact telephone, your mobile phone contact book finding out the name for the person. But of course, in your mobile phone, it is stored locally. In your phone or in your SIM, you store the name and the mobile number. But in the case of this, it has to go through all the hops. But DNS is a very distributed system. As I said, it will be cached at various layers. So very rarely you will have to go all these steps. And also once it's accessed, it is already cached. So next time you don't have to go all this way. All right, that's understood now, right? So now our browser knows its destination. It will go to the corresponding server. Okay, so google.com homepage. So let's create a, so yeah, now the question, what is a server? So that's the next step, right? Once you get the domain name, what should happen? It should go to the corresponding server. That's what we hear, right? Server is down, server is this, server is that. So what is this server means?
Server which hosts a specific application for that corresponding.
You're saying what a server does, but what is a server? You might have heard about this term, right? Server, a lot of times.
It's just simply a computer again.
Yes,
Server.
exactly. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay. Server is nothing but simply a computer. But why do we call it server? Because it specifically does one thing or a couple of things, like, serving you web pages, or acting as a mail server, receiving and sending emails, or acting as a database where it stores all the data. Okay. A server is nothing but a computer which is specifically designed to do, or specifically configured to do a specific task. It is not designed to do that, but it's specifically configured to do a specific task. But what is the difference between our regular server and a regular computer and a server? Uh, a server is configured in such a way that it has good specs, not only good specs, but also it is configured to run 24/7, 365 days. Throughout the year, it will run throughout the day, right? Of course, it also will encounter failures. It will also stop sometimes, but it is designed to run uh, for longer hours, unlike our laptops. Of course, these days our laptops are also very powerful. You can run them all through the day; they're still working fine. But again, this is a different level. Always you're sending requests and receiving requests. So your server is nothing but a computer which is designed to do a specific task. Of course, there are special manufacturing things, like, they're made by, again, something like your Google or HP, or so. If you want to look at a server that might be used in the data centers or cloud. Um, might look something like this. Okay, just like your computer tower only. But you know if you look at this one, this is Xeon E3 2140 processor it will use. This one comes with 8 GB RAM. Our laptops have more RAMs than these computers. Yeah, so something like this. It's nothing but a computer. If you remember the old days, you know uh, when we have to buy computers, we used to buy these towers. I mean, not this big tower, but yeah. So it goes to the server and gets the response. That's fine, but that doesn't work. This is not that simple. Okay, one thing you need to note is As I said, if you have your entire application running on the web server, one single web server, this might be a huge server with a great configuration. When I say great configuration, maybe it might be running 2 TB of RAM, okay, and maybe our computers, how much RAM they do have generally? On our
4
laptops
GB
or
or 8
desktop.
GB?
Yeah, you have 4 GB, 8 GB. These days you have 16 GB, and you have 32 GB computers also. Yeah, some, but they are premium computers, right? Very, very high-end computers. So of course, my computer also has 16 GB of RAM. The computer that I'm just explaining stuff on. Okay, but you know, at the maximum you go for 32 GB, and that is also an overkill. A 4 GB or 8 GB is like okay, good enough. 16 GB, yes, if you can afford, but most of that RAM will lie unused only. But yeah, that's fine because I use it for my work purpose also, for my freelancing purpose also. I took this laptop anyway. So you have 2 TB RAM, and let's say you have even 32 cores of CPU or 32 CPUs. How many CPUs does our computer have? Normal computers, either you have dual core or quad core, or 8 cores at the maximum, right? Even Apple's M1 processor, the latest one, I think it also has 8 cores or 8 CPUs, 8 micro CPUs. Okay, but let's say it has 128 CPUs, a very powerful one. So it can handle multiple requests simultaneously across the globe. But the problem is, if you talk about this is what we call it as a single point of failure. You might have very high specs, it can handle the load, but the question of redundancy comes into picture. What is redundancy? What if this fails? If this fails, entire world cannot see google.com web pages. Okay, so that becomes a total outage. And trust me, in the world of IT, you will hear this more often. In the world of IT, you should always prepare for a failure. You should always be ready to encounter failures. You might ask why? Because that happens. Your servers could go down. There could be a network glitch. This is connected to a single network. This is connected to maybe it is connected to a power backup or something. But the network cable might fail, or the network interface card might fail, where you plug in your network connection, or there might be some other failure due to which your server, just to be aesthetically pleasing, let's use this as our server for now. But due to whatever reasons, your server might fail, and then entire world will not be able to access google.com web page. Okay, so that's your first challenge. So how do you solve it? By creating a redundant system. What is a redundant system? Instead of one system, two systems doing the same thing. Okay, then maybe, or two or more systems, then maybe this could be a 1 TB RAM machine with 64 cores, and this could be another 1 TB with 64 cores. Total capacity still remains the same. It's still 2 TB RAM with 128 CPUs, but just that we have divided it into two multiple components, two servers. But remember, a IP address is assigned at the system level. Each system or each server has one IP address, but google.com, your domain names will allow you to only enter one IP address against your domain name. So let's say this has the IP address of, just a second. So let's say this has an IP address of 10 dot 10 dot uh, 10 dot 10 dot 210.11, sorry, 12 dot 10 dot 210.11, and this has something like 12 dot 10 dot 210 dot, let's say 15. Okay, don't worry if you don't understand how these IP address names are formed and all these things. We'll understand these things later, but just giving an example. So now, which IP address do you give in the domain name? If you give this domain name, what happens? Always the request will go to this time. We still have the same problem like earlier. What is that problem? Single point of failure. If this fails, everything else will fail. Okay. But if you give this IP address in your domain name, always the request will go to this server. So now how do we handle this issue? Have to be able to handle the load to either of these two servers. Okay, let's say you have a you go to a bank to deposit some cash, and there are two tellers in the sense two cashier points. So if everyone is going to the same cashier, the other one is there but no point. If there is only one teller, he might be always be busy, and he might even die of exhaustion. Right? So but you still have two tellers, two cashiers, but everyone is going to the same cashier. This person is idle and this person is overloaded. So then maybe you can put some receptionist or a ticketing tool or a token system where it will generate a token and says, okay, people, I mean, based on the availability, first it will send to this one, next request it will send to the next person, it will send to second teller, third person to the first teller, fourth person to the second teller, so on and so forth. Okay. So if you have such a facility, it will be awesome, right? So just like in your banking example, you can do it in real time with a concept called as load balancer. What is that? Load balancer.
Load balancer.
Yeah. So this load balancer does only one thing. It receives the request from the end users and sends the request to, just like a receptionist or a, may I help you desk at the banker. I mean, may I help you banker might answer some questions, but this load balancer might simply transfer it to the corresponding server. Okay. So this might happen. Okay. Right. So this will also have a IP. Let's say this has an IP of 12.10.210.100. So you will mention this IP in your DNS name. So all the users will come to your load balancer because this is the name mentioned in your IP address. So load balancer could be another server, or it could be a specially designed network device like your router. Okay. Remember, your router also has an operating system. Maybe it is running a Linux operating system, or what we call as firmware. Okay. Your Linux has also some intelligence. Your router has also some intelligence built into it. It has some storage. It has some operating system inside it. Okay. So similarly, you could have a network specially designed networking device whose task is only to receive requests and send it to one of these servers. Of course, you can connect this to a terminal through a computer and also configure those details. We'll talk about load balancers later, but this is your basic configuration. Okay, but so this is a server. What did we talk about? A server is doing a specific task for you. For example, serving web pages. So, I mean, allowing you to see web pages, or receive and send emails, store data, structured data, or unstructured data, like files and other things. Or sometimes just cache storage. Or sometimes it could be what else? It could be doing some business logic processing. There are different softwares to do these things. For example, if you want to run a website, you could install Apache or Nginx, which we are going to do in our course. Nginx, or from the Microsoft world, we have IIS, Internet Information Services. And for sending and receiving emails, you might have a lot of other tools like your Office Exchange, which is a licensed tool. You might use what are the tools? Can't think of any of the open source web servers right now, but I'll tell you. Microsoft Exchange.
MTP.
For storing Exchange structured data, you could use some of the sorry, someone said something. For storing structured
Yeah, I
data,
was
you
just
could
saying
use
about,
some. Go on, please.
yeah, I was just saying about SMTP mail servers.
Yeah, SMTP is the protocol. Okay, yeah, a simple SMTP server, or there are other tools as, yeah, SMTP server you could set up, or MySQL or MariaDB or Microsoft SQL Server. What else do we have? PostgreSQL Server. Come on, what else do we have as part of SQL servers? I think these are the things, right? And within the unstructured data, these could be some, you know, SMB file store, or NTFS files, NFS file store, or something like that. Caching, for example, you have Redis software. Okay. For business logic processing, you could create your own custom code and custom applications. So these could run on something like Tomcat or WebSphere. Okay, don't worry too much if you don't understand all these things. We'll talk about most of these things in our classes, but just telling that these are some of the softwares that will help you run your applications. Okay, so if you install Apache or Nginx or IAS on one of the servers, IAS can be installed only on Windows machines. I think you can install on Linux machines as well, but yeah, useless. IAS itself is sorry. So you would use either Apache or Nginx. Okay. um, they will serve the purpose of showing you web pages, or you could use MySQL or MariaDB to send to store data, structured data in the form of tables, like your database. Okay, like your Excel is also an example of a database. What does a database, a structured database do? It stores data in the format of rows and columns. Okay, unstructured data could be your files, your videos, and all these things. And caching means whichever information needs to be readily available to the web servers from the DB servers, they will act as a caching server for these things. And business logic processing, you create an application and they will work on it. Okay, so web pages will show you simply the web pages, but when you click on it, maybe the request is transferred to either the database servers or the business logic applications, or what we call it as app servers. Okay? So when you do something, your request first goes to the web servers and then it goes to the app servers. But these are only just names, right? There is no specific thing as app server that is readily available. You buy a server and make it as an app server by installing one of these applications as per your requirement. You could install something like Drupal for a PHP application, or WordPress. All these are content management systems and various tools. Okay, so if you install only Nginx, it becomes a web server. But along with Nginx, you could also install something like Apache. Then it is also an application server. Along with Apache, you could also install MariaDB or MySQL. Then it also is then it is a database server also. So you could install all the things on the same server. For example, when you go to google.com, the first thing it does is it shows me the web page. But this web page will get details from various locations. This one is based on my location. It is giving me doodle of the day about Subhadra Kumari Chauhan. Okay, so if you go to some other website, it might give you the country related material. Okay, uh, this picture might be stored in a this picture you need to have a, what do you call, the data file server. Okay, and similarly it has to load my profile details. Okay, and if I type something here, for example, how are these things coming up? Based on my recent search, right? So these things we have searched recently. So you see all these things. So this has to come from another application. My web page cannot simply give these things. My web page will can receive only this click, and this information is coming from a different server, maybe a MongoDB or something else. And when I type something like this, okay, what is a database, for instance, with a spelling mistake. So the quick load is coming from another set of software. Your Apache or Nginx cannot give these details. You need something like a MongoDB, which is also a database, but um, there are two types of databases. Okay, one is SQL servers, one is NoSQL servers. Just it could be some of the SQL server or some caching server, we don't know, but something like MongoDB, these things. Okay, anyway, when I type in what is a database, it gives me from another software. And when I enter this one, it will get all the details from its database. So you could run all these systems on the same server. Your MongoDB, your MySQL, your Redis, all things can be run in the same server, but that is again a recipe for failure. Let's say due to whatever reasons your MongoDB is stuck or taking a lot of space, then your web server will also not work. Okay, that's why we have to separate your processes. So if you have an app server, if you have a web server, create all in one server, only create your IaaS and keep two of them. And in the next layer, you keep your application layer, like the business processing. See, the requests I get from Google, taking the google.com example again, the requests I get are again personalized, right? If you type what is a database, you might get different results based on your search activity, search pattern, and all these things. So again, Google is evil. Google does these things because they want money. But these results vary as per your user profile and user past behavior. So when I enter this what is a database, it is not only getting the details from my database about what records Google has regarding database, but before that it runs a filter saying that okay, this person is more interested in DevOps kind of related, so let me give links which he might have accessed in the past, or which other database users, other DevOps users are using. So these are all customized results. Okay. So there is some business logic processing that is happening when I hit my search entry. Before it gets the results from the database, there is a business processing happening or logic processing happening. So that logic processing ideally happens in my app layer. Okay. So if you call them web layer, because the first layer of servers only serves you web pages, and the next layer of servers will serve you, will does the business processing. Okay. So again, there might be an internal load balancer between these applications. So if my web server 1 has to contact this, it will go through the load balancer, and so does this one. Okay. And this load balancer will redirect to one of the, yeah, we'll stop in 5 minutes, folks. I know we took a lot of time. Okay. So this is your app layer. And then to store your data, you need to install MySQL. So for that, you might create another layer of servers, which is called as MySQL. Now, each of these servers need not be so big as 1 TB, because um, uh, we are differentiating the functions between each of these ones, right? So your first server will only, okay, your first server will only serve web pages, first set of servers. The second set of servers will do the business processing. Okay, this person is Kiran. In the past, he has access to so and so websites. This is his behavior. All these things are written by code by Google engineers, but that code will be executed by this machine, this one of these two servers. Okay, and based on that, they will fetch details from they'll fetch details from one of the database layers, one of the database servers. Okay, so this kind of setup is known as three-tier architecture. Okay, three-tier architecture. So here's the client. Client is the person who is making the request. I'm trying to get the data from the server, so I'm the client. Server is the one which is answering the request. In this case, first when I access google.com, it goes to the web servers. Web server will load the page. Then when I'm typing something, it will use the it will use the app server's business logic, and app server will try to get the details from database and show it on my web page. Okay, so this kind of setup is known as a three-tier application. Sometimes your web and app might be served by the same set of servers. Even then it is called as a three-tier, but mostly it might also involve a particular uh, just a second. Yeah, I just removed the DNS from the picture so that you understand what three-tier architecture is. So your client, your web, app, and DB. This kind of setup is known as a three-tier architecture. But typically, these three layers will not be sufficient to handle your requests. Okay, why? Because uh, not only the business processing, as I said, you need so many other things to be get done. What are those things? Like your quick search, right? When you're without even entering your name, without entering the result completely, it is giving me some quick results. What is that? Like, uh, name some data. See, I type data and it giving database or database capabilities of Excel, database software, data structure. So I just type till data only. If I give DA also, it's also talking about dairy products. But first thing it is getting me is database, because it knows, okay, on this user profile I mostly search for databases and all these things. Or for example, if I put DEV, oh, it's giving me developed countries and all these things, but device, so it's giving me some DevOps tools also. Okay, DEV, developed countries and development tools, development goals, all these things are giving. Okay, this might be done by a different set of servers. Okay, so so when you have more than 3 layers of servers, okay, when you have more than 3 layers of servers, for example, this might be caching servers, um, and then you might have something like caching will always sit between your DB and your web somewhere here. Okay, I know the picture is really jumbled up, but just giving you some understanding. This might be some your analytics server to run some real-time analytics on your user pattern and all these things, so that they can suggest me ads. Okay, so when you have more than 3 layers, it is called as n-tier architecture. N could be any number. Okay, n-tier architecture, right? N-tier architecture meaning where you have more than 3 tiers of application of servers. Okay, so if you have only web app and DB, it's called as 3 tier. When you have more than web app and DB, it is called as n-tier architecture. All right, so this is how your applications are served. So first, when you enter some domain name, it will have to get your domain name. Once the domain IP address, sorry, once the IP address is obtained for the corresponding domain name, it will go to the load balancer. The load balancer will route to one of the web servers, and the web server will interact with other servers and get you data. So these web servers, I mean, these servers will not you will not directly communicate with these things, but through the load balancer, you're communicating with the web servers, and the web servers are communicating with you. I mean, these servers are communicating to you with the help of web servers. So every request is made through web server. This is how a typical web application looks. But if you're using some command line tool or API tool, it might vary in a different format. Okay, understood? So tomorrow we understand virtualization. So to
Yes,
use
sir.
so many physical machines is difficult. For Google, it might not be difficult. For even if it's not difficult, it's unmanageable if you have so many servers. I'm saying 2 servers, but Google might have at least 10 or 15. Just giving an example. And each of them need not be a physical machine. They will be a virtual machine. What is a virtual machine? What is virtualization? We'll talk about it tomorrow. All right. Any
Okay.
any questions? Not only this, if you have any questions on the course or anything, we can use for the next 5-10 minutes and we can continue. If you do not have any questions, you can drop off today and we'll connect tomorrow. Again, there might be some discrepancy between the course content that I sent you and what is there here. Maybe I'll send an updated course content to all of you. But yeah, we'll cover most of the topics that were there in that one. Now, open for questions.
Hello, are you
Yep.
able to? Yeah, I just got
Yes.
one doubt. Like
Mhm.
while we, like if we open the search engine and we type on the google.com or something, whatever websites,
Mhm.
sometimes the websites take a bit longer and sometimes it will give a much quicker. May I know why does it takes a bit longer?
Okay, there are multiple layers to understand this problem. Okay, so is it only that website that is taking longer, or is it all the websites that are taking longer. If all the websites, you know the obvious answer, right? It could be your internet connectivity. If only that website is taking longer, there could be one or two from the application perspective, we cannot say what could be the actual reason. Maybe the website is overloaded with so many requests, they don't have so much capacity. Happens with our government websites, right? Or tax websites, or even on the day of results for CBSE or even SSE, you know what happens, right? Most of the times the application is very slow, and also it sometimes crashes. So they're running on low capacity, or they have run over their capacity, meaning more and more users are accessing that. Or they have some issues, like, you know, you have two servers, but one of them has failed and only one server is handling all the load. Or uh, it could be the network bandwidth at the server side. The server side doesn't have good network bandwidth, meaning it cannot, you might have high broadband speed, because other websites you're accessing, they are accessed like zip like this, right? But from these servers, it's you know but you're sending a request faster, but when he's sending the response back, it is not coming faster. Okay, it's like a pipeline. Okay, so if you're drawing water from a tank, you might have a big opening at your end, but at the sending end it might have only a small pipe, right? That is your network bandwidth. So
Yeah.
you, if you're using it with a other pipe, other bore well where it has a big opening, you might get water faster. But this bore well itself has a very small opening. So even though you have a bigger bandwidth at your end, at the other end the bandwidth was low, so it is not able to send request fast. So, or the application is not performing well, the code itself is bad. Okay,
Okay.
because the developers have written code which is taking a lot of time to process and send you back the response. So there could be multiple reasons. If it is a temporary issue, that, you know, sometimes it's working fine, but sometimes it's not working fine, that means one of the servers has gone down, or, you know, there is some traffic congestion, lot of traffic and all these things. Okay, um, so that's how it's done. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? And the course itself also is fine, not only on today's topic.
Sir, I just sent you two messages here
Yeah, I'm replying to you.
in the chat box. Okay, sir.
So, Kiran, if nothing, I just take 2 minutes to share. Maybe not a question or might be related to this. So
Yeah, go
around
on,
that,
please.
yeah, sure. Around that domain registration, let's say I am running a business and I just wanted to create a website called xyz.com, and there is already a similar business, and they are also having something like a website called like xyz.in, and
Hmm.
there is a organization which controls it. Like there is something called like WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, using
Hmm.
which the other business guy, they can go and pretty much file a legal suit against me, saying that, I mean, this guy is doing the same business and this guy is having the similar domain registration, which might lead my business into some other mislead. So
Uh,
I personally experienced such issue.
as far as I know, you cannot use that same trademark, same branding of the company. So let's say I can register my company as, say, let's say you said xyz.com, right? So the company which is originally using it might be xyz.corp. Sorry, they registered their company as XYZ Corp. Okay, and they have their branding, like, you know, particular set of um, logo and all these things. So I logged in, I created my website because it's their responsibility to create a domain name, but you created with, let's say, xyz.tech, and you're using this for your company X. So their company name is let's say XYZ Corp, and your company name you registered is X goes to YZ, let's say some random name. Okay, so you're not using their logo, you're not using their brand. Okay, who are they to sue you? Where is the intellectual property here? Where is the IP? If you're using the brand, then it's a problem. So they should either come into an agreement with you saying that, okay, since your company is not XYZ, why do you want XYZ.tech and confuse people? Sell your domain name to me and go buy a website called as X goes YZ or something. Just giving an example. But why do you think IP will come into question here? Domain name is not IP. XYZ is not IP. The logo is IP. The design is IP. Intellectual property or trademark, not even intellectual property, but it's a trademark. But how do you think the domain name itself can be a intellectual property? They haven't done anything to create that name, right?
Correct.
Yeah. If you're reusing the logo or impersonating them, like you are not that company, you're not Flipkart, but you're trying to act like Flipkart, then it's impersonation. But from the domain name itself, I don't think the question of IP will arise. Okay, that's their fault that they did not register xyz.tech. That's why a lot of people earn money by just registering their domain names. They register a lot of domain
Yeah.
names. Like when when they know there is a company called as Flipkart.coming, they'll register all these Flipkart.in, Flipkart.xyz, all these things because that will come cheap. And tomorrow, Flipkart will come to them and say, okay, boss, I know you bought your Flipkart.xyz IP address, but I don't want users to go to a different website. But for example, there might be Flipkart.co.in. I showed you, right? So initially, Flipkart might not have registered that website, but some people out of habit might go to flipkart.co.in instead of flipkart.com. Then if it leads to some other third party website which is also an e-commerce website, then Flipkart cannot sue that person for saying that unless he's using the same brand and all these things, right? Yeah, I mean it's a larger
Yeah.
discussion again, not straightforward. You are right in a way, but yeah. And always notice this one. Okay, what matters is the last part, flipkart.com. Now there are scammers. What they do is they send you a link saying that Flipkart offer today. So the website will be like this: offer Flipkart dot nonsensewebsite.com. I mean, not exactly nonsense, but something like XYZ. So when they hyperlink this, hyperlinking, right? It will be hyperlinked like this on your Gmail or on your Gmail or your on your what do you call WhatsApp. Okay, why is this coming in this way? Okay, did I use the other way around? Markdown has different formats. I'll tell you. Wait. 1 second. I mean, it's easy to hyperlink. Okay, when you receive it, you will not receive in like .com. So when you look at the website, it looks like, I mean, when you receive in your email or on your domain name, it looks like flipkart.com. Okay, but when you click on it, then it actually takes you to a page called as offer-flipkart.nonsense.xyz. Okay, on the browser you see online-flipkart, but actually what's the domain name? Nonsense.xyz.
Offers hyphen nonsense. Yes.
Yeah, this is a subdomain. Even this ICANN will not know, IANA will not know unless there is some audit. I mean, this is an internal part. Only this part you have to register. This is your domain. This is your subdomain. Okay, subdomain you can manage whatever you want to. Okay, for example, as I said, I have my website called as learndevops.club. Okay, now if I want, I can create google.learndevops.club. But who are you reaching to? Not Google website. You're reaching to learndevops.club. Within the learndevops.club, I created a subdomain called as Google. Okay, I can create Facebook. Learn DevOps.club also. Okay. Point I'm trying to say is be careful about these things. Okay. When you receive these offers, 50% off on most Flipkart deals, and you will get the link like this. Okay, you'll get a message like this. Let me. Yeah, I know we are out over the time, but just trying to explain some cyber security things. So you'll have messages like this. Flash, flash. So this is what Markdown language is. Flash. Come on. Have a new keyboard. Okay, you see these kind of messages, right? With lot of emojis also. Online sale, 50% discount.
Yes.
You will also see spelling mistakes, lot of them. 50% discount on all computers, valid for today only. They have to press you for time, saying that this is valid for today only. Otherwise, you will ignore that. Valid for today. Okay. HP laptop only for 11,000. Something like this. Okay. And the message looks like this on your screen. Right, with all these bold things and all these italics, some spelling mistakes, valid for today only, HP laptop only for you'll see flipkart.com. Okay, you'll click on it. It opens on your mobile browser. It will not take you to the Flipkart mobile app. It will open on your browser because it's not flipkart.com domain. It's some random link. And when you open it and you see it, it will ask you for some details. Okay, to enter this offer, enter your mobile number and PAN card and your Aadhaar number. That's it. Done. Scammers can do anything with those details. Not immediately maybe, but later they will do. Okay. So last part of the domain name is what is important. Okay. So if you look at this, it says offer Flipkart. You see, okay, Flipkart is right there. The spelling is also right, but you ignore the last part. That's where the maximum challenge is. He cannot create a website called as, talking about the DNS name, he cannot create a website name known as what's happening here? Nonsense. He cannot create a website like nonsense.flipkart.com. This can be only created by flipkart.com. Of course, they'll obviously not create it. Just saying. If you want to create sales.flipkart.com, you cannot create it. Not flip. Is it right spelling? I think it's right. But this can be created only by Flipkart. But you can create Flipkart.sales hyphen mega hyphen sales, for example. Mega hyphen sales might not be purchased by anyone. You can purchase this website called mega hyphen sales. Okay, this will be available for like $5 or $1, $2 also. Sometimes you'll get websites. I bought a website for $1 recently. Okay, I mean the name of the website, not the website itself. Then I can spin up a simple cloud instance and start running flipkart.megasales.com, and I'll send my lots of WhatsApp messages which will hyperlink like this. Okay, you'll see flipkart.com, but that will take you to flipkart.mega-sales.com. This will, just like how I showed you that, if you type in facebook.co.in, it is taking to some random website. I cannot even, continentalcellular.com. Okay, it doesn't even have a SSL certificate. Okay, so this is a fake website, obviously. So Facebook cannot sue this company because they're not using Facebook logo anywhere. Okay, but what these people can do as scammers, they will say that Facebook has an offer today. Go to market.facebook.com. But the hyperlink they give is on the name. You will see that facebook.com, but the link behind the name is this one. Okay, these are some of the basic scamming attacks, not even hacking. Very basic scam attacks. You see it on WhatsApps and other things. Okay, so be careful. All right, that's about it for today, unless you have any other questions. Yeah, I will supply material, Dinesh. I told you, right? I have my notes in PDF. I have my notes in some notes in GitHub, but most of the things will not be I mean, Most of the things are covered in the notes, but some things might you still have to make your own notes. And these recordings will be available for you. You can replay them, watch them, and try to learn. Okay. Sometimes I'll share directly links to the resources which you can study. Okay. And by the way, since most of you are already here, oh, it's already 8:40. Today only I scared you, right? So you can go to a web, you can watch this beautiful video called as How DNS Works. But damn Google, it is showing my favorite songs also. Okay, how DNS works. Where is that link? Yeah, this one. This one is an awesome video. Come on, shut up. Yeah, this is a very interactive video, very good video. Do watch it. I think it's for like 2 minutes or 3 minutes long. Yeah, 6 minutes long. But yeah, quite useful. Please do watch that video. That's your study material for today. See, this is also a material, Dinesh. Okay then. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll have a lot of learning, lot of discussions. So yeah, hoping to see you all again tomorrow. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye. Kiran.
Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.